That's right. Don't adjust your sets, guys. Welcome back to the Geeks and Company. My name is Jeff, aka Messiah Complex Cosplay. Joining me is not, in fact, JS. It is editor Megan, otherwise known that Valkyrie girl. Megan, hi. Welcome to
Hello,
the after
hello.
show. Editor Megan is a fan of The Rings of Power, The Lord of the Rings of Power, the series that has just returned on Amazon Prime. Season 2 launched today. The first 3 episodes launched. However, we are only going to be talking about episodes 1 and episodes 2. We're simply going to give you our viewpoints, our opinions on some of the key factors and scenes and issues that happened. Here, there be spoilers. We're going to be talking about specific things that have happened in the first 2 episodes of the second season of Rings of Power. So if you haven't watched them yet, go watch those and then come back and watch the after shows. If you have any thoughts or feelings that you'd like to share with us, please put them down in the comments below. And as well, of course, as always, please like, comment, subscribe. Megan,
All of that stuff. That's the
you've managed to
important
watch
stuff.
the first 2 episodes of season 2 of the Rings of Power. And before we get started here, let me just get your really quick impressions about season 1 of the Rings of Power that has led to us doing the after show for season 2.
I really liked season 1. It was definitely a little slower than I was anticipating. I think I'm more used to like Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, Witcher, those sort of fantasy medieval kind of content, but I really enjoyed it. I like the storyline they took. They seemed to balance the different characters and different places they needed to go fairly well. And I had fun, and I'm ready for another season.
Yeah, I feel about the same way. I understand the pacing might have been a little off for some, but I mean, essentially, you're telling a new story in a new time with new characters. You've got to spend the time doing the world building and doing the character building for you to care about the places and the people that are going to be affected by everything that's about to happen. In order to effectively do that, you've got to put in the legwork.
The like main connecting thread characters are the elves, and even that, it's basically just Elrond and Galadriel. And it's new actors, so you're getting a new version of them that is much, much younger.
Jumping right in with episode 1.
I was gonna say my gut reaction with the opening actually is what stuck with me because yeah, Sauron being killed by his like army before
and Adar or Adar or Adar. Yeah. There seems to be several different pronunciations of his word. Yes, by the way, if you're not seeing things, if you watch this episode, a new actor has been cast as Adar, corrupted elf that seems to be leading the Uruks, as they call it, which it looks like it's just a bunch of goblins and orcs and such. So yes, we get to see essentially like almost like Sauron's origin story based on how we meet him in the first season.
Yeah, that's fairly
accurate. What was it about that kind of stuck out to you that was like,
oh, just the gut, my reaction to he's goo. That's something. I don't know how I feel about him being goo and then reconstituting himself through bugs and rats and that one poor lady on a carriage.
I think it's fascinating how much the entire narrative of the Lord of the Rings relies on great swaths of time passing where literally nothing happens, because he ends up this pile of goo in a cave, and then they show the stalactites and the stalagmites being very tiny, and then they zoom out and they black out and they come back in, and all the stalactites are now huge to show you how much physical time has passed since he became a puddle of goo. We see him. Yes,
I was supposed to be laughing while he was like rolling down hills and getting run over by a cartwheel, but
yeah, it's funny because it really transitioned from being something super creepy and well done. The fact that he looked all like this wormy creature that was struggling to survive, just like he just kind of like flops out onto a side of a mountain and then like flurbles down the side of the mountain to the roadway. And then gets run over, and it's just like, hey, someone's probably driving this. They might be good to eat. He comes out looking like a different
the human was
person.
Enough extra nutrition content was enough to make him look like a person again instead of like a pile of goo.
It'll be interesting to see if at some point in the narrative in the near future or some point during the show we get to find out what exactly Sauron is. He's clearly not just your average run-of-the-mill mortal, be he elf, dwarf, or man. We do see Sauron, as he was claiming to be king of the Southlands, is captured by Adar and the orcs and the Uruks, and is held captive and prisoner. And he ends up making a deal with Adar to go back to the elves and betray them and report back or whatever for information on Sauron, which, of course, we know as the audience he is, in fact, Sauron. But in so doing, he doesn't go back to Galadriel or the High King or Elrond. Who does Sauron go to?
Celebrimbor.
He goes
Which
to
I am going to say
Celebrimbor.
correctly now that I did not say correctly in the recap video I did.
Yeah. So he goes to a place called Eregion, which is where the elven smiths reside, and they make all their cool elven stuff. And chief among those cool elven smiths is now, especially after forging the 3 rings of power for the elves, is Celebrimbor. And that's where Sauron goes back to. And we're going to explore this a little bit more when we talk about episode 2. But I feel like if there was one elf for Sauron to go back to and hang out with, it was definitely Celebrimbor. While all this is going on, we have 2 other main narratives in episode 1 that are happening. If you missed halflings and tall people just walking lots like you got in the Lord of the Rings movies,
Is it Lord of the Rings content if there isn't tiny halflings paired up with tall wizard?
but walking, just a lot of walking. If you missed that somehow from watching the Lord of the Rings movies and you're like, where's just people just walking endlessly across beautiful landscapes, boy, is this episode and the next episode for you. Gandalf seems to be hunting down what looks like his staff. Sorry,
Are we just
not
deciding that he's Gandalf?
Well, I mean, I've heard conflicting reports. I've heard that he's not actually supposed to be Gandalf. He's supposed to be one of the wizard class or whatever. I don't know how many
Centauri there are, so
I don't know either. So if it ends up being not Gandalf and it's just some rando, aren't you going to feel like a little bit betrayed at that point? Like,
it depends how far into the season we get. If it's like the finale of this again, and then we find out who it is, like, I mean, it's likely. I have a feeling that's probably where they're going to go. If they even tell us this season, maybe it'll be season 3.
Doing it. I don't know. He keeps having a dream about retrieving his staff, and they make a point of saying that not just any stick will do. It has to be his staff that they're going to find. So we get Nori is with not Gandalf, or maybe Gandalf, or who knows Gandalf. But now
the wizard.
We actually also get Nori's friend Poppy joins them, because if you don't have 2 of them like Frodo and Sam, what are you even doing? You can only have so much banter.
Go off on their own. You need an additional halfling.
This particular narrative, the Nori and not Gandalf narrative, thus far anyway, throughout all of the season, first season, now into 2 episodes of the second season, feels really disconnected from the rest of what's going on. Like everything else, I feel the stuff with Adar, the stuff with Galadriel, the stuff with Elrond, the stuff with the elves, the stuff with Sauron, all of that feels interconnected. Even the stuff that we get in episode 2 happening with the dwarves still feels somehow interconnected with everything else that's going on. But all the stuff with Nori and Poppy and not Gandalf feels like it's completely its own thing, like almost like it's a completely different show. Do you feel that way too?
Yeah, definitely. Like whenever I feel bad because I like it as its own story. I think I would like it being its own show, but in part of this, unless they start connecting it in soon, like I would rather just not even see those parts.
Yeah, I think the thread that's going to tie all this together for this season is, of course, the rings. So the elven rings have been crafted. Elrond absconds with the rings.
He does not like them rings. He wants to get rid of those rings.
Elrond had found out on his own that Halbrand was, in fact, Sauron, and Sauron was there to help create the rings, or at least guide Celebrimbor in making the rings, even though he did not touch them, as apparently we found out in this particular episode. So he absconds with the rings and goes to another elf who we've not met before, that apparently is amongst the oldest and the wisest of the elves, who is charged with getting rid of the 3 rings. And so in so doing, he decides just himself in a tiny widow sea vessel, a tiny little sailboat, goes out into the middle of what looks like just a lake, and goes to pitch them overboard, and then inadvertently kind of touches them, and then hears their siren call and is like,
I want one of them rings.
I want one of them rings. And I think they'd be pretty dope if we gave them to the other ones as well. And in so doing, we get to find out that the elves are actually able to stay on Middle Earth. What I find curious, and help me out with this too, is why do the elves want to stay in Middle? Like, they're giving Galadriel shit all the time for not going to Valinor when she had the chance. Literally, I think he says to her, the sun of Valinor shone on your face and you turned away. Yeah. So all the elves now can go there, but they're like, nah.
So the way that they're like pitching it, it feels like, is very like savior guilt complex. If we leave, everyone else is going to die and be suffering at the hands of the new Dark Lord because we're the only ones that can protect them.
But it does seem odd that the elves are still sort of very disconnected. All the races are very disconnected from each other, yet the elves don't want to go to literal heaven, but instead they decide to stay. And of course, they need the rings to stay, because if they had not put the rings on, the leaves and the trees would not have come back, and they would have been forced to leave. They would have been dying otherwise. Where are you on this whole Elrond with the rings? Because as the story progresses, it seems like he's still the only one that's like, no, these are bad, because now the people are wearing them and the elves can stay, and everybody's like, hey,
these rings, pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
I don't know how I feel about Elrond's characterization in general. Like, I kind of didn't care about him during the first season, and right now he's fairly annoying, but I'm hoping that'll come around. I like him a little bit better in the second episode. My only other thing that I want to say for the first episode, at least, but Danger Puppy. I loved the Danger Puppy. But that does sort of give an idea of like maybe Sauron has this like affinity to animals or like dark creatures, like he can control them more easily. So
yeah,
maybe details, but also Danger Puppy.
And that's funny part about that is it's kind of one of the few times in the series that I've kind of been taken out a little bit because of everything that we've seen. The dog creature that our good friend that Valkyrie girl is referring to did look very CG. Like it was the first thing that I saw that kind of like, oh right, I'm watching all the scapes and all like everything else looks brilliant. It looks so good, but I was like, that's not there. That's not a thing that's actually there. That's something
they should have gone like my Labyrinth fan is going to show here, but they should have gone like puppet base with then like details put over top. But you can tell that entire thing is just CGI.
Yes. Please, kids, don't encourage her on this. He does as he's interacting. If you've watched the episode, as Sauron is interacting with this particular dog as he's captured in a prisoner of Adar, he does have some sort of a connection. He actually starts using words, and the dog responds, and then he actually leaves the dog sort of with a command that ends up killing his jailer, essentially. Leading into episode 2, we then get a new narrative dynamic that starts to happen. We do get to check in with the dwarves and see what's going on in Khazad-dûm. Now, if you're not sure, Khazad-dûm is what ends up being called the Mines of Moria in the Lord of the Rings movies that you're familiar with. We get to check in with them, and we get a really beautiful tracking shot of the way light comes into Khazad-dûm through all these shafts and then mirrors set up, and all of this direct sunlight being able to hit the crops and the greenery and such. It just provide light inside.
Who would have thought you need sunlight to grow things and live
in the middle of the mountain? Yeah. And of course we're still seeing effects of the first season. We're seeing that during
the third and during the fourth, they're both Durin.
So King Durin has disowned his son Prince Durin, who I guess is Prince no longer. Prince Durin's wife, Disa. She's very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not aggressive. That's not what she is. She's very, she's assertive. Capable. Thank you. Assertive is the exact A word that I was looking for. She's very assertive. She's also a stone singer. So a tragedy happens. There's a giant Mount Doom type thing that creates the land of Mordor that shakes the very bowels of the earth and ends up hurting Khazad-dûm. It actually collapses all these amazing sunlight shafts that we saw. They do reference a lot of what happened in season 1, throwing Elrond. Some of the dwarves blame all the damage that's been done because Elrond was there in the first place. Other dwarves are like, it's because you threw him out. And Disa is a stone singer. They try to figure out through singing, or it looked like by the end, just yelling at the rocks.
I would say it was cool that that's like a thing, but yeah, I want to figure out why. I mean, presumably they'll say at some point why they can't like hear the mountain anymore, like what changed, but
and we don't know. I'm assuming it's not mithril. Like we know from the lore, mithril does get mined and it does get used in specific things. So it's not like
it's for the rings, the swords, like there's a whole
armor. There's a bunch of stuff that mithril ends up being utilized for. So we know that's not it. But yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens as far as that goes. But our boy Elrond. Okay.
Oh, Elrond.
We do need to talk about Elrond a little bit, because I think what the goal was to have Elrond be essentially the only voice of reason in a forest of madness, like the island of reason in the ocean of madness that is the elves right now, with the rings and the temptation and everything else. And what he comes across as is a real whiny, pouty bitch most of the
Sure
time.
does.
Initially, I was like,
because he looks so young, if it would like come across better if he looked more like a little older, a little wiser, but it's just such
you
a
know what?
baby
I don't
face.
think so. I don't think so.
You know?
He's just being so obstinate, and the fact that we as the audience knows that the rings do have a certain level of corruption that can only be unlocked once the one ring has been forged, which it has not yet, by the way, guys. Right now, there's only
Yeah,
3
they're
rings
choice.
that Celebrimbor himself has made and fashioned, and it has allowed the elves to stay on Middle Earth, which is what they wanted to do in the first place. So all of that tracks. So until more of the rings get made, as Sauron in this episode starts to try to convince Celebrimbor not even to make the dwarven rings, but to make the rings for men first, which is an interesting tack and
Yeah,
angle.
it's a weird.
Elrond is just like, he's just very obstinate, and it seems like he's gone from, I feel like, the champion of reason and logic, and now he's just like, well, I'm just stubborn about this now. Like, now I'm just gonna keep pouting, like, even though everything's working out great, I'm still gonna make sure that you guys know that I'm not
Because
okay.
you saw in the end of the last episode that they put on the 3 rings and life and whatever came back to the tree, everything worked out. So there really isn't a foundation for his concern anymore, other than him just being like, but Sauron was near them. He knew they were being made, and he was around, so they need to be evil.
So I feel like I almost wish he'd have been kind of like almost out of the equation. Like, they put on the rings, but he doesn't know that they've been super effective. So he still remains suspicious, but like from afar. But the fact that he's right there and he's right beside them and everybody's working towards this great common goal and everything else, that's what I mean. Like, it's the rings themselves had a purpose. They did do what they were intended to do, especially for the elves in the first place, which is why the elves still have their rings and they're not like ring race like the rings of men were. So it could very well be, and I think they may be showing us a little bit that here, that the first rings, these elven rings, are made strictly by Celebrimbor with no real influence from Sauron, and now the subsequent rings, especially the rings of men, will have some Sauron influence. But it wasn't until like halfway through this episode, I was like, oh, Celebrimbor doesn't know that that's Sauron. He just knows he's not supposed to talk to him. Because initially I was like, when Sauron was talking to Adar and he was like, I'll just go back to the elves because they trust me. I'm like, no, they sure as fuck don't. They clearly do not trust you. They know that you're Sauron.
Because the only elves that know that he's Sauron are Galadriel and Elrond and the king.
And does that make...
I don't think they've told anyone else, which seems like a super stupid move.
Okay, so we do find out in this second episode that the High King does create a message to send to Eregion, to Celebrimbor, to say Halbrand is Sauron, literally, like in bold capital fucking letters. Elrond, sorry, not Elrond. Halbrand is Sauron, and of course, you said. By the way, you send one elf with one scroll. Guess what happens? Doesn't make it. So we find out towards the end of the episode, apparently any messages that have been coming from Lindon to Eregion, so from the Elven capital to where the Smiths are all being intercepted, because he's not getting any messages of any kind. He's not heard from Lindon or the king in any way, shape, or form. And by the way, it's not till the end of this episode that the elves and Lindon go, hey, maybe someone should go to Eregion and find out what's happening.
Maybe we should like check up on them.
It is decided towards the end that Elrond is going to lead an expedition from Lindon to Eregion to try to figure out what's going on. But we find out and we learn that someone has already infiltrated Eregion, and now, for the third time in 2 episodes, someone looks a whole lot different.
Same actor though, which like
this is, I mean, fair. And I gotta admit, the guy from the first episode, the very first Sauron that we saw, did have a passing resemblance to the Sauron we got. It's not like he looked like a wildly different dude.
Yeah,
he
similar
did
enough.
Look that he pulls a Batman first, by the way. I don't know if you noticed or not, but they're sitting there having the conversation.
And then
yes, and then the windows blow open and lightning strikes, and as Celebrimbor turns around, he's gone, and it's like, he's Batman now. That's wild. And then a bunch of magic tricks happen. He spills this expensive wine. The lights go out in the place. And then out of the forge fire comes Anatar, who is Halbrand, who is Sauron, who is now an elf.
I mean, it makes sense. If you want the elf to trust you, then appear to them as an elf.
Is this supposed to somehow shield him when Elrond and Galadriel show up? Like they're going to see him and not realize that that's... Are they just going to be like, wow, that elf really looks like Halbrand? Like, is that how that's going to go?
I don't know. I don't know what route they're going to go for it. I think he's going to try and not interact with them at all, because he even mentioned to Celebrimbor, like, he revealed to Galadriel who he was and it went badly, so I'm not going to tell you who I am. Just trust that I am from this higher power, and here's all a bunch of magic tricks.
But then at the end, he's like, this is who I am.
Made sense to, like, he's going to talk about how you can't tell them that I'm here. I will guarantee that is going to end up being what happens.
I get what they're trying to do. I guess if it was me and I wanted to make sure that I still knew this was Sauron, but I wanted to be able to have it so that nobody else would know that it's Sauron, I probably would have recast that actor again. You got an entire season with the first guy. The mystery box is revealed. We know that he's Sauron. Having him come out and say, I am now Anatar, and having someone else that kind of looks like that dude, but isn't that dude, I think sort of shields him from... Because right now, I don't think it's going to take Elrond very long to be like, that's the guy. Like, it's not... Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not really...
I don't know, man.
Yeah.
We'll see where it goes. At the very beginning of the second episode, Galadriel's, like, vision from her ring was basically like a ritual seeing of, like, the One Ring poem.
Right. Yes, and like, you see cool. Celebrimbor saying 7 for the dwarves, 9 for the men. Like, he's literally listing off. So at this point, the rings have to be crafted, then taken to the dwarves, and the dwarves have to agree to wear them.
Yep.
And then have to be...
dwarves have been invited to go to the forge.
To a Region, right?
Yep.
Oh, sorry. I did want to mention this, by the way, too, because especially in the second episode, because they really make Halbrand out to be this master manipulator, especially when it comes to Celebrimbor. And what I got watching the first and second episode, and even in the first season, is that Celebrimbor is not a smart dude.
No, he didn't.
Yeah, he comes across as super talented at what he does, but he also comes across as like super easy to manipulate and just not a
very trusting, very
guy.
naive.
Yeah, because initially I'm like, I think they're trying to position Sauron as this master manipulator, and then as I'm watching it, I'm like, oh no, Celebrimbor is just really dumb. Like, it's not. There's nothing that Halbrand is doing that's super masterful. I would feel a lot more intimidated and threatened by Sauron if Celebrimbor wasn't such a pushover and so easy to manipulate. You know what I'm saying? Like, it would make more sense to me. He would be more feared and respected if he had found a way in and just twisted Celebrimbor to his will. But he's just like, the other elves don't like me and I can't tell them, but you and I are secret best friends. And I'm like,
oh my god! We completely forgot about a major thing that happened in the second episode. So the halflings got sucked away in a tornado because
they did. Because not Gandalf found a staff that he thought might be his.
Can't control his magic because he got a staff, but it was the wrong staff.
Can we point out too that his magic, when out of control, seems a lot more powerful than anything that Gandalf pulled off in any of the movies at any time ever? This brother just summoned a tornado in the middle of the desert that literally cooked everybody, including his little hobbit friends. I'm hoping this is how they tie the not Gandalf narrative back to the entire rest of the show that's happening, but I'm not confident.
Considering we just made it through this entire thing and we're like wrapping up, and I'm like, oh wait, shit, the wizard and his hobbits.
Because I mean, again, my notes for episode 2 were Celebrimbor is dumb and Elrond is pouty. Like, those are my big notes for episode 2. So, but yes, hopefully we'll find out what's going on with not Gandalf sooner rather than later, and hopefully we'll be able to get them over to the rest of the narrative in some way, shape, or form. I don't know how that's going to be. Guys, tune in next week. Next Friday, we will do part 2, episode 2, that will cover episodes 3 and 4 of the after show. As far as the Rings of Power go, let us know below. Are you enjoying it so far? Do you have some issues? Do you have some praise to heap on it? Do you also think Elrond is a pouty bitch? Let us know in the comments below. and anything we might have missed talking about, or anything you'd like us to talk about for the next episode of the After Show. Guys, we'll see you next week. Stay geeky, everyone.